In this video, I discuss gender performances. To begin, let me say that there are biological differences between people we characterize as men and women. There are systematic, genetic, hormonal, and brain differences. Yet those differences are not that great. Men and women are not opposites, to be sure. So why then do people behave in gender expected or appropriate ways so much of the time? It cannot be about biology. As the authors of your readings report, women are 4 times more likely to major in education than men are. Men are 5 times more likely to major in engineering than women are. Women are much more likely to learn to dance and sing than men are. If men become musicians, they are likely to pick an instrument and not use their voice. So men and women differ in the choices they make in systematic, non-coincidental ways. And the range of choices is large, from choice of college major to how we look at our fingernails. Women tend to put their hands out to look at their nails, while men tend to turn their palms in and curl their fingers toward them to look at their fingernails. There are so many examples like this. Okay, so we learn these gendered behaviors and then do them out of habit oftentimes, and also because we know it is expected of us. That if we fail to do them, we may be subject to teasing or ridicule. So we do not do them automatically all of the time. We don't know we are doing them lots of times, and other times we do them quite consciously. We are aware of managing people's gender expectations of us. So this is a lifelong dance, if you will, that we do, that we're engaged in. We're learning new ways of expressing gender and making choices about what we will and will not utilize. So we do not blindly follow gender expectations. We are actively involved in making decisions about the gender rules we will follow and those we feel comfortable breaking. So while we think about children being socialized with specific gender expectations, it happens throughout our lifetime. So how do we do gender? A simple, straightforward example of how this works is what my son learned in preschool. We hoped he would learn how to get along with others and have some experience in a school setting before starting kindergarten. Well, he learned a whole lot more than that, including one lesson about shoes. He learned that there are girl shoes and boy shoes. I'm not exactly sure how he learned that, but apparently they were sorting shoes from a bin or something, and he had not known before that sorting exercises that kids did not just wear shoes, but that there were 2 kinds of shoes, which he was excited to tell me about when I picked him up that day. Needless to say, it was important to him to have boy shoes after that, because after all, he could tell me, I am a boy. So really, there are lots of lessons here. 1, apparently there are 2 kinds of shoes in this world. 2, this rule is obvious and not negotiable, at least at his age. 3, following this gender expectation was important to him and something he was not comfortable challenging. 4, it was an easy way for him to express his gender, to make his gender clear to others. Oh, I just need to wear boy shoes because I'm a boy. Of course, some kids, especially these days, are more comfortable challenging this rule than others. My daughter, for example, took great pride in wearing only boy shoes. She was comfortable challenging that gender expectation in a way that my son wasn't. So sociologists use the term doing gender to describe how we follow or break gender rules. Gender rules are those things that we learn to do that lead others to see us as a boy or a girl or a man or a woman. The differences in boys and girls' shoes is just one rule. You know how these kinds of shoes are supposed to differ. If you are somehow unclear about this, visit a store that sells shoes and you will see distinct aisles for boys' shoes and men's shoes and girls' shoes and women's shoes. Likewise, toy stores. They make no bones about having an aisle for boys and an aisle for girls. So these gender rules apply to shoes, clothes, makeup, what we major in, the careers we do, who we socialize with, how we socialize with others, how we decorate our space, our hobbies, and so forth. These rules, of course, vary across cultures, across place, and they vary across time, throughout history. One example is the photograph in your text of President Bush holding hands with the Saudi Crown Prince. They could be expressing their love for one another, which is how we might interpret it in the United States in this time in history, but instead, according to President Bush, he was doing what is acceptable for adult men to do in some Middle Eastern cultures, which is hold hands with one another. Likewise, earrings. Since about the 1960s, girls and women have gotten their ears pierced and worn earrings. At that time, it was understood mostly as a girl thing. Boys did not do that in general, pierce their ears, but a few did. By the 1980s, earrings started to be worn by more men who worked in the music industry or were professional athletes. And now we see all kinds of people, those presenting as men and women, girls, boys, babies, younger folks, older folks, wearing earrings. And not just in their ears. My grandmother never heard of earrings that did not go in ears. She died before people in the U.S. began piercing their eyebrows or belly buttons. This is not something she experienced in her lifetime in this culture. So gender rules vary across time and place. So if these gender rules vary across time and place, and different rules apply in different situations, how do we learn the rules? Well, we already discussed a few examples. My son learned about gendered shoes in preschool. And before he learned that, he learned at home, for better or worse, to differentiate people based on a perception of their gender. For better or worse, we'll talk about this another time, he learned that he was considered a boy and that his sibling was considered a girl. He had to learn that distinction, and he could have been, but he was not taught that there are 3 or 7 genders. He was taught essentially from a variety of sources that there are 2, and he went with that, and he sees many others make that same distinction, and he continually learns what that means. And that distinction is still important on a daily basis for him in junior high school. Maybe he will come to see 3 genders or see gender as fluid and not about 2 distinct categories at some point in his life. But when that happens, it also will be a product of his particular set of social interactions, the ones he has from this point out, this year and next year and in college. That is true for everyone. We learn gender rules throughout our lives, and those rules are constantly changing. So this one view that there are 2 genders is something children have down. They just come to know it in this culture, in this time in history, by about the age of 5. From that point on, in this culture, in this time in history, children can be said to be wearing a pair of gender binary glasses. That is, they see the world in terms of these 2 gender categories that they have been taught to notice and differentiate. They then attempt to apply this understanding of the world when they say things like, "Those are girl shoes. I can't do that. I'm a boy." Or, "That is something that girls do." And as we get older, we tend to become somewhat more tolerant of gender variations, not rigidly following separate lists of things and activities for boys and girls. And we navigate gender roles and expectations in more sophisticated ways, but we still navigate them, are aware of them, think about them, and respond to them in so much of what we do. It's a lifelong learning and socialization process. Gender rules seem simple or obvious for the most part, but they're actually shifting and complicated, and even contradict one another, as we have discussed and will discuss in this course. So we learn rules. Why do we follow them? For a few reasons. Habit is one. We learn how to act based on our gender, and many of those acts become second nature. We don't remember where they came from or why, we just do them. They become a habit, well-learned, well-practiced behaviors. They seem natural, innate, but they're just well-learned. An example would be keeping our hair long or short, talking softly or forcefully, wearing dresses or ties, makeup, or a thick-banded watch. Why do men tend to have thick-banded watches? Because that is how those watches are. That's what we know, have learned, is masculine. Besides habit, we also follow gender rules for pleasure. It can be fun, feel real good, to pull off gender-appropriate attire, looking manly in a tux or feminine in a gown. And we want to avoid the negative consequences of violating gender rules, even if it is just disappointing our parents or playful teasing by friends. Because gender is so central to so much of who we are in this culture, in this time in history, we want to get it right, fit in mostly, not have the well-learned gender rules be the point of focus, unless we want to make a statement and counter the rules. Gender policing reminds us of these rules. When my son got schooled about there being boy and girl shoes, or the boy is told that only girls wear barrettes, or we are asked if we are really going to do that thing that is not supposed to be done by our assigned gender. And probably all of us have been engaged in gender policing. Parents might advise their young child against dressing as a princess for Halloween if they see their child as a boy. You might have told your sister or friend not to do or say or wear this or that thing because you were worried that it did not match their assigned gender well enough. You were trying to be nice, helpful. There's no judgment about this, by the way. Again, we're doing sociological analysis here, trying to understand what we do and why we do it. So, how do we break gender rules? The short answer is by offering accounts or explanations for our violations. If I am not dressed gender appropriately, I might offer that I'm behind on my laundry. If I take over a conversation, I might explain that I had too much to drink. If I like playing basketball, I might keep my hair real long so you know that I know what I'm supposed to do and be around gender. So breaking the rules is expected, and yet, if we're questioned, we often explain our deviance away. In the way of a summary, here are the questions discussed. Okay, that's it. See you in class.